In the late Ming Dynasty, a scholar lived quietly in the shadows of Mount Tai. But one autumn night, two mysterious sisters appeared in his courtyard, and from that moment, his life was no longer his own. What began as chance encounters would draw him into a web of desire, danger, and secrets older than he could imagine. But before we begin, if you're drawn to stories with mystery, meaning, and the otherworldly, to legends passed down as truth, then this is the channel for you. I share new stories each week, drawn from folklore, forgotten history, and strange events that linger at the edge of belief. So tap the like button and subscribe with all notifications on so you never miss what's next. Let's begin. In the late Ming Dynasty, there was a young scholar named Shang who lived in Taishan, or Mount Tai. His family owned this small estate that was enclosed by a high-gated wall. Now, his parents were elderly, and they lived in the main house with the servants, while Shang had found this old abandoned servants' quarters that he claimed for his own, because he's growing up, he's already in his 20s, and he thinks, you know what, I'm gonna be my own man, although he is still on his family estate. Now, this structure was where he would study late into the night. Shang wasn't really driven by wealth or power. What really drove him was learning, curiosity, and the quiet hope of finding meaning through his study. Now, he was drawn to poetry, and he would often mull over questions of fate and destiny, wondering if paths crossed for a reason. To him, even a chance meeting might carry a deeper purpose. And one moonlit evening, a young woman crept lightly over the garden wall. Now, Shang saw this, he was startled, and joked about how odd it was for this young woman to just jump over a wall, especially of a residence that she didn't live at, of a family she didn't know. Now, she kind of laughed it off, saying that actually she had seen him earlier that day at the market, and she kind of followed him a bit. She thought he looked interesting, and he entered into the calligraphy shop, where while he was there, he knocked over these brushes, and then he tried to play it off to the store owner like, oh, I don't know what happened. They just kind of fell. And so they both kind of laughed. And then she said, well, you know, I followed you back to your house, but I didn't come inside at first. And now I felt, you know, I really want to meet you. And so she introduced herself as Tertia. She was obviously very bold, she was witty, and she was also beautiful. And then with a playful grin, she added, well, aren't you gonna let me in? She teased Shang until he finally invited her into his little cottage. And from that night on, she returned each evening. Now, after a few visits, she then brought her younger sister, Corda, who was 19. She was radiant, yet modest, and her voice was very soft. Now, Shang was just fully entranced. The sisters soon became nightly companions, so they would sit with him by the lamp, talking of curious things, fates, fortunes, hidden threads of life. And one night, they told him that his essence was unusually strong. They claimed they could see into his past life, that he had once been a Buddhist monk who spent decades in meditation, nearly reaching enlightenment. Though he fell short, the virtue he carried forward made his vitality unusually pure and bountiful. Shang laughed it off as fanciful talk, though he had always deep down been very interested in Buddhism. Now, before leaving one evening, the sisters told him that they must go away the following night to perform a ritual in the hills to honor their ancestors, but they would return after. So that night, alone in his room, Shang received another visitor, also a woman, striking, well-dressed, carrying food and wine. Looking through the window, she laughed at his modest table, teasing that a scholar should be treated better. He thought, well, I better invite her in. So he says, well, come on in. She pours him cup after cup of wine, telling these funny stories, brushing her sleeve against his arm as she leans closer. When he said that he had little to offer, she set her hand lightly over his, whispering that his company was enough. Bit by bit, she coaxed him into comfort until laughter gave way to intimacy and she drew him to the bed. But later that same night, Tertia and Quarta returned. The moment they entered, the stranger froze, panic in her eyes. The sisters erupted in rage, shouting, "You dirty beast! How dare you lie with him!" The woman bolted, completely forgetting her shoes, leaving them behind. Quarta turned on Shang in fury, threatening never to see him again. Only after his desperate pleading did she soften. The next morning, a traveler arrived at their family gate, dressed in the robes of a Taoist. Shang's elderly parents, seeing he was a holy man, greeted him warmly and welcomed him into the courtyard, calling their son over. Only then did the visitor reveal his true purpose. He was an exorcist from Shanxi. He told them his brother had been slain by foxes, and after months of pursuit, he had tracked them here. Shang's parents were alarmed. To prove his claim, he unsealed one jar. Inside, writhing and snarling, was the seductive stranger Shang had laid with the night before. Her form twisted, half woman, half beast. Shang's heart sank. Later that afternoon, Quarta came by herself, slipping quietly into Shang's room. She seemed unaware of the traveler. Shang revealed to her that a Taoist had come earlier that day who was in fact an exorcist hunting foxes, and that he had already captured the woman from the night before. Quarta froze, and he asked her directly, "Tell me the truth. Are you one of them?" She lowered her eyes and confessed. Yes, she and Tertia were foxes. Tertia sought his essence, as did the stranger. His vitality, born from his past life as a monk, that was irresistible to them. But Quarta had chosen another path. She secretly practiced the Tao, seeking to shed her fox nature. She admitted she loved him, but warned that such desire endangered her cultivation. And she also warned Shang that if his essence was drained through lust, it would be a tragic waste of his past life's virtue. Their conversation ended abruptly when Tertia entered, and at that very moment, the exorcist appeared, revealing he had been lying in wait for the two sisters to show themselves. He raised his staff and struck the ground, scattering talismans that ignited with blue flame. Smoke surged as he chanted, the air thick with the clang of unseen bells. The sisters tried to flee through the window, but he had already prepared it with hidden charms. When they struck against it, a wall of glowing symbols flared, driving them back. With a sweep of his sleeves, he cast a net of light that coiled into smoke, binding both sisters. The vapors twisted, and then they were pulled in, writhing, into the waiting bottle, which sealed with a hiss. He proceeded to tie down the mouths of the bottles tightly with pig's bladder, just as the old methods prescribed. That afternoon, Shang's parents, who were overjoyed and thoroughly relieved, prepared an elaborate feast in the courtyard to thank the exorcist. They bustled about, directing servants, bringing out trays of steaming dishes, bowls of rice wine, roasted meats, and fragrant vegetables. Neighbors peered in to watch, impressed at the display. Shang sat at the table with them, but unease gnawed at him. While his parents laughed and praised their guest, he couldn't stop thinking about the sisters. He kept glancing toward the altar where the jars rested, and his heart was unsettled. At last, slipping away under the cover of the feast, he pressed his ear to one of the jars. From within, he heard Quarta's muffled voice whispering, "Will you just abandon me like this?" His chest tightened. Unable to bear it, he followed her whispered instructions. Topple the altar flag and pierce the bladder with a pin. At once, a thin thread of white smoke rose from the jar and slipped into the sky. Now, back at the meal, the exorcist froze mid-drink. One of his charms blackened. The incense flickered and sputtered. He stood abruptly, went to the courtyard, and saw the altar flag fallen. Snatching up the bottles, he shook them. One was lighter. He muttered, one has escaped. Without a word, he gathered his tools and rushed out, following the spirit's trail with talismans and chants. He easily found Korda behind Shang's cottage. She did not flee. Instead, she knelt, her head bowed, her hands pressed together. With a trembling voice, she pleaded that she too was a cultivator of the Tao, walking a different path from her fox kin. She swore that she had long forsaken harming mortals. To prove it, she summoned a glow of Taoist light that shimmered around her form and recited protective verses that she had studied in secret. She begged not to be judged by her birth, but by her deeds and her discipline. The exorcist circled her, testing her with charms and incantations, watching the light hold steady. After long hesitation, he relented. "If you falter, I will hunt you down and destroy you. But if you remain true, then continue your path and prove it with virtue." Tertia and the others remained imprisoned. Quarta alone was spared, but left for the mountains. 10 years later, while supervising harvesters in the fields, Shang saw Quarta beneath a tree. She was radiant, her fox nature shed. When he begged her to come to his home, she shook her head. "The mortal world drags me into desire and attachment, which would shatter my Tao. But take heart, I will come back for you when the time is right." With that, she vanished. 20 years after that, Quarta appeared once more. She told Shang solemnly that his death was near, but he need not fear. She would guide him. When the day came, as his soul slipped free, Quarta appeared and took his hand. Together, they walked the road of Yellow Springs, the path of the dead. She guided him safely, keeping him from straying. But at the gates of the underworld courts, she stopped. "I cannot enter. To cross is to face judgment. I am still a fox, unworthy of human rebirth. Only through countless good deeds may I one day earn that chance. Then, cultivating again as a human, I may reach heaven as a true immortal." Shang passed through the gates into judgment, comforted. Quarta continued her journey of accumulating good deeds and cultivating the Tao. Quarta's fate is bittersweet. Though born a fox, she chose compassion and discipline, rising far above her original nature, with the ultimate goal of transcending the mortal realm. Now, the author of this story, Pu Songling, who recorded this account in his book, Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, written over 300 years ago, writes it as fact, noting that a Mr. Li Wenyu, who was a relative of a friend of the author, personally knew Shang and recounted that this actually happened to him. Now, before we go, I want to thank you for being here. Every time you watch, like, or share, you help breathe life into these stories. For just the cost of a cup of coffee each month, you can get early access, bonus tales, and deeper insights into the stories. But your support doesn't just keep the lights on. It fuels growth. It means I can dig deeper into forgotten legends and bring more of these stories to life at a higher level. This channel doesn't just belong to me, it belongs to us. And every member who steps inside isn't just a viewer anymore. You're part of the foundation that keeps these stories alive. So, if you'd like to preserve the legends that deserve to be told and truly take part in this channel's growth, click Join below. I can't wait to welcome you inside, and I'll see you in the next story.